All right. I figure it's 10:44 and 59 seconds. We can start them. So I'm Ken Hansen, Principal Program Manager, PowerShell. Been there for, I don't know, 14 years or so. And with me is?
I'm Joey Aiello, Program Manager for PowerShell as well. And, I guess this speaker is off. I hear myself on some speakers, so I don't know what's...
We have a one-speaker system here.
Is anybody, check. Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now? Nope. Okay. There's one monitor that sounds like it's not on the stage right. Check.
Can you guys hear us anyways we talk?
Check. Anybody? Nope. Still no? Bummer. All right, these guys are hopefully getting this figured out. I hear myself ringing really loudly here, so you're still no? Okay. Check.
Well, he's going to have to walk up, you could give him time.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Gotcha. Sorry.
This is the physical world, not the logical
the cables
world
in the back
software.
Or something. Software-defined audio, right? What's
software-defined audio. That's right. Software-defined service. That's what we want. It's
yes.
Instantaneous, man.
If that was a virtual speaker hosted in Azure, it would be working.
Then we could replicate it.
Yeah. Just, fill over clustering. There's one right next to it. Just bring it right back up.
That's right. We're all done.
Check. Is that working now? You got it? Nope. Still no. Bummer. We might have to get started here anyway. I'm sorry, guys. I can make sure I'm talking really loud.
Can you guys hear it all a little bit?
I will project this way to the room and try and, definitely. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Pardon?
Oh, it sounds like stage left needs a little more volume as well.
Or, I don't know. We'll let the audio guys handle it. We'll keep moving. So we're here to talk a little about PowerShell. Just to be clear, this session is a 200-level session. So we're not going to be drilling into a whole bunch of new stuff that you've never seen before in your life. We'll give sort of perspective of where we're at now, where we're going. We'll talk a little bit about some of that. And we'll talk about heterogeneous computing, in this case, Windows Server 2016, down level, handling different data types, and of course also on the Mac OS and Linux. So we'll start talking a little about the Windows Server 2016, what's in PowerShell 5.0, 5.1, and then we'll delve a little more into the heterogeneous and open source PowerShell. Before we do that, this is a common slide you've probably all seen before. I'm not going to drill into it. This is kind of what we're heading for with Windows Server 2016. We have really invested in built-in security from the ground up with shielded VMs and others. We have a whole new software-defined data center with software-defined networking and storage, and we have a cloud-ready application platform as we move to Nano and other things. So it's really worth checking out. Come visit people at the booth. Let's talk a little bit historically about PowerShell. This is just put it in context. We'll go through a couple of minutes of this. In the beginning, there was no PowerShell. Exactly. Life was difficult. Automation happened rarely. Maybe you used DOS. Maybe you used VB script. These were the Stone Age days of tools. Later on, we enterprise, and on the other hand, what we did have is Windows NT came along and actually provided a GUI, and so you had server for the masses, right? So they were all out there, but people were just doing point and click and trying to make things work. The next era was sort of what we call the enterprise era, right? And at that time, we had Active Directory came on Windows Server, and PowerShell began to exist. That was 10 years ago. In fact, we turned 10 November 14th of this year. So when we actually had our first release, so we're kind of pleased with that. We'll do some sort of celebration there. We had a new scripting language built around structured data. Actually, I would call it task-oriented and data-driven, if you will. One of the key elements of it was still glue because we worked on Windows. We'll talk about that a little more, and it was good. The next level was full automation, because when we first came out with PowerShell, as some of you might remember, we had 200 commandlets or something horrible, right? So you could do a get process. And if you see Jeffrey do any demos, he sometimes still does get process. I think that's embedded in his fingers now, because that's the only command we had working at the time, and so it just automatically goes there. So we play with get process all the time, us old guys. So anyway, that was the age. But here in Windows Server 2008, we finally had complete coverage almost of PowerShell. We had thousands of commandlets that let you really begin to get the value from the platform. The community actually, just to be clear, and this is down here, empowers us. The community's been with us from the very beginning. In fact, before PowerShell actually released, we had people already, almost kind of like in open source mode, actually submitting issues and giving us all kinds of bugs and problems. So we really appreciate that. You guys who use PowerShell drive us to make your lives better by improving it, right? So don't stop pushing us, don't stop submitting the issues, don't stop having the user voice. Finally, we enter PowerShell and the cloud era. That's where we are today. We'll talk about that a little bit. We now have a set of stronger DevOps tooling, introducing DSC, Desired State Configuration, which we put out in 4.0, and in 5.0 really expanded in terms of making it more robust, more complete, a much stronger offering and presentation. We have this pester testing framework. How many people, just to be clear, if you all use PowerShell, just tell me, please. God, thank you. All right. I will go through a boring demo for some of you just to make a particular point to emphasize it, but I'll get back to there. And how many of you have used desired state configuration? Excellent. We got some of that. So the rest of you have not. We'll do a little touch there again as a 200 level. And then, how many of you have used Pester? Okay. Pester's really a great testing framework. I think we'll touch on it a little bit later, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, great thing about Pester, actually, just to real quick, this is a community module. So this was actually something started by some members of our community that we decided to take into Windows and PowerShell 5 because we thought it was so critical to the sort of DevOps workflow that we've introduced with Windows Server 2016. So, you know, this is really when we're starting to become not just community-oriented, but really embedded in the community and integrating the community directly into the product.
Become more community-driven almost.
Yes.
It's really worth pointing out that Pester is kind of the first, the Trojan horse or something, the first one that came in. We were the only one who actually shipped an open source generated binary in Windows Server. And you have to think about what that would have done to us like 4 or 5 years ago, right? I wouldn't have this job, but it's true. But with Satya, he's made a huge change, and his leadership team he's brought in, they have been very focused on delivering what you need to drive adoption and get your jobs done, and we absolutely love that. And so that's enabled us to do things we could not do before, including, as you know, shipping PowerShell on open source, and we'll show you what that looks like towards the end of the presentation. So that should not be underestimated when you look at Microsoft direction, how empowered we now are to deliver value in whatever way works. That's just, it almost can't be overemphasized, I think. So,
but to wrap this one up, yeah, we got, you know, just tons of new features in this thing, and we're going to throw up a slide in a second, but, you know, we're really emphasizing more power with PowerShell classes. We got more security with GIA. This is basically
auditing.
Auditing logs where your full, you know, deep transcription and encrypted, tamper-proof transcription of all your logs. You know, we're again gallery. We're becoming more community embedded. This is where we're, you know, shipping hundreds of community modules you can install right at your terminal. We're going to be showing some of that today. Yeah, just and of course the heterogeneous announcement. I mean the fact that we're on Mac and Linux.
On Mac and Linux, huge. So okay, here. This is actually, I want to step a little bit here and walk through some ideas. Spend a few minutes on this idea of heterogeneous. PowerShell is glue. How many have heard this concept before? I don't know, but I get it deep in your mind somewhere because we think of ourselves as glue. And it's not like we did that by choice, right? We did that because we had no choice. We were the first shell on Windows, and the configuration data for Windows is a pig's breakfast. Right? You've got it in the registry, you've got it in text file, you got it in XML, you got it in CSV. Some of it's not even accessible in files at all. It's only available via APIs, right? Some of it's just in a GUI. It is just all over the map. And so anytime we try to take something like a bash or a normal Unix approach to things, there was nothing to operate on because they all assume text. And so given the necessity of the challenge we faced, PowerShell said, oh, what the hell are we going to do? It was actually part of Jeffrey's insight. He had 2 or 3 key insights that really have driven us here. And he looked across and said, okay, we got to create something that actually makes sense out of this. And we actually created a thing called the extended type system. We don't talk about it a lot. I just spend just a little bit on it. It's the thing that actually allows you to talk to all other types of objects. So with the extended type system, we actually don't talk directly or did not talk directly to .NET. Now we can with some of the new compiler work. But what we did instead was, in fact, you had a PowerShell object. And that thing knew how to talk to .NET or COM or WMI via what we called a type adapter. Now it turns out those type adapter interfaces are public. You could write your own type adapter. If you had a particular API or a particular data set that you actually wanted to expose directly into PowerShell, highly integrated, you could do that with an extended type system adapter that you could write. It's just a .NET class just derived from it. Look it up, you can have a good time with it. But we wrote our own for COM. That's how you access COM methods as well on the Windows side of the house. You with me? Along with that, though, we also did something else, which is a little more easier to get your head around, which is the convert froms. You know, you can convert from string, which is an awesome new function coming out there. You can convert from JSON, convert from XML, all these things that brought then text data into the pipeline. In fact, let me just play with that just a little bit here, if you don't mind. There's this new thing, and everybody's pretty aware of this, right? This invoke web request. Invoke web request can go against like any URL, right? So if we're down here, let me just play with it a little bit. This just gives us a whole set of stuff. And you'll notice that we've been kind of thoughtful about it and have played out a certain number of fields and properties. But if you really look at the content of this thing, it's JSON, right? It's text, but it's a special kind of text. So we can get smart about this, turns out, with PowerShell. How does PowerShell think about that content? Well, we can't get past it, right? If I do a $i content, you're all familiar with get member, right? I hope so, because if not, well, you will be soon, right? I can't do much. I can do toLower because it tells me that it's a string right here, right? It's a system string. I can't do a hell of a lot with it. So instead, what we could do is we could, in fact, do I don't want that one.
You got your dot backslash there.
Oh, it added a dot for me. Thank you very much, tab completion. You know, as Jeffrey says, none of us are great typists, so that's why we have tab completion, but sometimes it gets in your way. Now let's back this up a little bit, assign this to an object, and we'll show you what you got here.
So again, we're just going up and hitting the GitHub REST API here. And as Kenneth was saying, just spitting back pure text, but that's not useful to us in an object-oriented pipeline. So
now we just convert from the text and convert from JSON, and we automatically get this object back that parses it out, and we can access it. You all with me? So just to the next level of detail, you get it. But this idea, this concept of saying, we're going to take text, we're going to take anything and suck it into the PowerShell environment is a key element of what we call the glue or PowerShell everywhere. How do we begin to just grab value in? Because then we can do analysis on it. Now, there's a little better way of doing this. It turns out that we got a little smart, and we said, hey, look, instead of just invoke web request, you can use invoke REST method. I don't know how many people used invoke REST method before. Highly useful. It knows it's getting JSON, so it's a lot smarter, right? Invoke web request goes against any website. Invoke REST methods. That's, oh, I'm going against REST API. I can do this, because otherwise I have a hard time remembering, you know what it means. So we'll just sit here, and if we wanted to, we could drill all the way down through this. Let's just do a...
And what's cool here is that just like with a PowerShell commandlet where you're looking at tab completion and get help and so on and so forth, you've got some sort of meta discoverability here. Right? So you do this invoke REST method, and all of a sudden, GitHub is spitting back to you a bunch of the methods that you're able to execute against this REST API. So we're sort of learning about the REST API. We don't even have to jump into GitHub's API documentation to find out what kind of stuff that we can do here.
Which makes it a lot easier. So it actually becomes, it's not just glue, it turns out it's very discoverable glue, right? You can actually figure out what it is coming along. And as you see here, this is a PS custom object. Everything's really a PS object underneath in the internal bowels of the thing. This is a PS custom object, all these note properties we get added. If we had a type adapter and JSON allowed us to do like functions, you could actually see script properties or other property types show up here, and we could actually access them directly. But we can't. So if we take a look at the get member, now let's just do this real quick here. Run the selection. What you notice, hey, we got a bunch of repository things. That's cool. Let's take a look at this repository. Maybe we can figure it out. This is the PowerShell repo.
Yeah, so if you'll see down here, you see, and can you guys see the text in the back, by the way? Are you guys, can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Thumbs up, I see back there. Okay, thumbs down. Okay, can we get a couple control pluses here?
Control plus.
Maybe 2 or 3 of those.
Is that good?
Thumbs, good. Awesome.
Okay, good.
So yeah, you'll see here at the bottom, like GitHub's telling us, you know, you've got this, if you want to look at the repository, you can do /repos/ the owner / the repo. So we're just plugging that in. Repos, we're the PowerShell, we're the owner, and we're going to our new open source repo for PowerShell.
That's it right here. This whole thing just told us here's how you do that. And so now we just go to the next thing.
You go, hey, we want to find out about like some stuff going on with all of our GitHub issues, right? People are filing all these issues, and so we'd like to see, you know, is there some API, you know, extension on that repos that'll tell us about the issues in that repo.
So we just pull in this exactly as is. We run the selection. In fact, $issue. Oop, hell. I'll just run the selection here. Fix my typing. And we get a whole lot of issues. All right, so there's a better way to do this. We actually had a little function. In fact, if you take a look at this right here, what you have is this is just a function we wrote. It turns out as you start to do some of these, this is word noting. This is a small technique you might want to learn. Sometimes they have paging. And so in this case, we just wrote ourselves a little routine because it turns out you can only fit so many issues on a page. They actually return from you with invoke REST method. And if you have more than one, you have to sort of go through and sort of aggregate them. It's a pretty simple algorithm. This is it right here. So we just wrote a little function that it did exactly the same invoke web request, gets the next one, converts from JSON, and writes it and aggregates slowly but surely into this issues list. So I'll just cheat for a moment and leverage that function just to finish off a little bit and show you how far you can take this.
But the cool thing here, you know, just like you guys are used to using the ISC, I'm sure, to sort of discover how to manage a system and then sort of build your script on the fly, you can use invoke REST method to sort of discover how you can operate against a REST API and then actually build a more robust function on top of that discoverability. So if you're like me, you experiment a little bit, you play with it, you see what kind of properties and methods are available, and then you go and actually write something that you're going to use over and over again.
Right. And that's where this whole wonderful tab completion comes in. So I won't bore you too much more, but the basic notion says issues gives us all these things. You can start sorting by comments because you can discover them, right? So as soon as you go to issues, you see issues, you see this thing called comments, and you can say, okay, let's just take a look at this no property comments. What does it contain?
And we see that that's an int, so we know we can sort by that thing. Glorious
exactly.
Object-oriented pipeline.
Right, so we can just do a sort, not a sport, a sort, descending, comments. We get too many of them, so I'm just going to select tab first, 10. That's great. And of course, we can do the format table, just make sure it all makes sense. And so this is how you can actually start to play with the system and start to figure things out, right? So this is just sort of the basic notions. But the key is, if you go back, it simply says that from the beginning, we've had to do this. Now, this is JSON. right? Now, as they start to look at the Unix side, Linux side, what they have is they have a -JSON output for every command. Right? We did that before when we were on Windows, and it cost us millions of dollars to do like 300 commands. But with the convert from, you don't have a problem anymore. You just suck it directly in, you get it. Okay? So that's the whole 10. How do you handle these outputs? How do you handle the inputs? So the key is we've created a discoverable glue that is task-oriented. Now, the glue didn't stop there. The first thing was, how do we actually take it across versions of Windows? We brought it down to Windows Server 2016. This took us a lot of effort. And we continue to make it across all of Windows. Recently, just this past year, we took a long while and actually converted or ported from the .NET framework onto .NET Core. And .NET Core is a very reduced subset of the core CLR, just sort of took out the reflection, all the key pieces we needed. And they compiled that, and that's what we layered PowerShell over. So we actually worked with them to make sure it sort of worked together. So we actually had just the right pieces that PowerShell would work, and we sort of went back and forth as to what types we would need and what types they would implement and how they keep it small. And that's what's shipping in Nano.
This is the core application platform for Nano servers. So all these sort of born in the cloud applications, that you need to be a lot lighter weight. You're designing them for containers and cloud-oriented infrastructure. You're going to build those on .NET Core and Nano servers. So now you've got PowerShell in .NET Core.
Absolutely. And the key here also is, and by the way, the PowerShell and .NET Core over time will be side by side. So you actually run version 6, version 7, version 8 of PowerShell Core side by side. So you actually won't break scripts. You actually have a whole new opportunity we didn't have before because Core CLR allows you to do that. We're on Nano server. And now, of course, as we announced August 18th, we put not only PowerShell on open source, but we ported it to the Mac OS and to Linux distros. A whole series of Linux distros. It was pretty well received. We actually spent some time at LinuxCon. It was kind of fun to get our photo taken with Linus and so forth. That was kind of a fun little event for Microsoft. They were kind of wigged out, but it was an experience. The key here, though, is it still benefits you guys tremendously. Here's the promise we've made from the beginning of PowerShell, and this we hold pretty tight. Jeffrey calls it the sacred vow, and that's we know that your guys' hair is on fire. And learning a new language, or learning how to use DSC, or learning how to use convert from JSON, or learning how to use this new function pretty cool called convert from string, none of these things look like a bucket of water. So our promise is that if you take the time to learn not just PowerShell, but to learn something new, that we will make that more and more and more valuable every year. And that's what we've done here, I think, in particular with the PowerShell open source. Your expertise should be more valuable, more broadly used, more accessible. You should be able to do more things with it and manage more types. We'll always try to live by that, make it more useful every time. So that's the stick. PowerShell as a glue, we're proud of it. All right, let's talk about where we're headed to now in the
so we have sort of
implementation.
three themes of the talk here, power, velocity, and ubiquity. So the idea here is that as we're entering this sort of cloud era, the scale of everything is increasing and the complexity of these interdependent components at a cloud scale together are exceeding the sort of skill and manual ability of you guys, right? So in many ways, we need to make things more powerful so that you can do more with less. Equally, with velocity, I'm sure you guys are being demanded, having more and more demanded from you as time goes on, and you're really being forced to change more rapidly than you were before. And we're in the same boat. I mean, we got to ship Windows faster, we're shipping PowerShell faster, we're putting more out all the time. So we keep
moving faster and faster, the rate of pace of change. And then, of course, the last one, ubiquity, everywhere, make sure your skill set's extended, keep learning it. That's the heterogeneous environments. They are the norm. And the one I didn't talk about in the prior slide was, on-prem, in the cloud, and of course, the hybrid case. And that's growing also. That's another case where PowerShell will start playing everywhere, particularly as we bring PowerShell more and more to the cloud. what would that look like? We're trying to figure out exactly what that experience would be and how we would best leverage your expertise in the cloud moving forward now and in the future. So we never stop thinking about how we expand your value as we start across the entire management landscape. Because one shell to rule them all. It's all right. Keep going. Don't tell anyone I said that. All right, PowerShell 5.0. Did I mention we did a lot? There's a velocity. You get that sense. This is kind of an eye chart. We're not going to go through it in detail. We're certainly not going to demo all of it unless Joey's able to introduce us to it.
I'll be at the booth later. You can, if you guys got a favorite we don't show here.
That's right. There's some cool stuff here going on, though. If you just take a look at the sheer volume of stuff on desired state configuration, what we really did was with 4.0 was kind of a .8 release. And with PowerShell 5, it comes into its own. There's still a few things, the crufty edges we'd like to clean up that are still there. But in terms of sort of local configuration manager, you now get reporting out. You have the opportunity for one node to actually wait for a resource on another node, right? So if I'm on machine A and I need machine B to complete some particular action before machine, or to actually, because it's desired state configuration, to arrive at a particular state before machine A can now do the next step to arrive at its state, you can say that now in DSC. So it gives you the opportunity to talk through that kind of thing. One kind of interesting technology with desired state configuration is composite resources. Anytime you make an actual configuration, it itself can become a resource. One of the challenges faced with that is if I get one from this guy over here and one from this guy over here and one from that guy over there, it could be that you're all touching the service resource, you're all touching services. In version 4, this wasn't allowed. We just sort of blew up because we wanted to make sure the consistency check didn't allow that. Now we have a smarter consistency check so you can actually have a shared resource and integrate and merge them. So it's just a whole myriad of things, including some security stuff as well.
Yeah, we've got in system level programming and really a lot of, you see a lot of here that is stuff that's kind of smaller to some extent, but it's stuff that you guys have been asking for a really long time. Right? A lot of these commandlets, something like the archive commandlets, right? The ability to unzip a zip file from PowerShell. It's right? So it's really, it's small, format hex. It's just a hex dump, right? But these are things that make my life easier. I'm sure they make your life easier. It's just stuff that sort of rounds out the rough edges, as Kenneth was saying. So, it's really, this was a release where we really looked to the community more than ever to make sure that we were doing the right stuff.
Absolutely. Maybe we should touch on the classes a little bit. You want to show them that one?
Yeah, I think we're gonna. You want me to do that right now here?
Yeah, let's pop in.
Yeah,
then we might pop back to a DSC one, but let's see where we get the classes.
Yeah, so let's switch over to 5 here. So classes, right? This is system level programming in PowerShell. So how many of you guys write C#? C# developers. So not a ton of you. How many of you are familiar with object-oriented programming as like a general concept? Okay, cool. So hopefully, right, because we're dealing with an object-oriented pipeline here, but we added some stuff in PowerShell that sort of brought some of the more runtime-y constructs, right, where you're sort of always emitting stuff to the pipeline into more of a parse time construct. So this is the ability to really, define stuff up front and really write any kind of application you want in PowerShell.
Right, a little more expected. So you don't automatically write stuff to the pipeline now with...
No, yeah, and I'm going to be going over that right here. So,
awesome.
so there's a couple things, right? So first, I've defined this class car, right? And you can think of a class as sort of an encapsulation of some properties and some methods. So kind of similar to like a PowerShell module, but this thing's actually going to define an object type. And it's actually, as Kenneth was saying, PS object under the hood, which goes all the way down. It's really a .NET object under the hood. But here I've said, we got a car, and I've made up another type here, car color. And this thing's an enum, so you can kind of think of it as like a validate set. I'm giving it, a range of values that are possible, and what's cool here is this automatically is going to show up in tab completion, right? So if I say car color here, I've got to define this enum. So that thing's defined. I can say : and I'm going to get all these options right here, right? So I can tab right through. I've got all the types.
I love tab completion.
Tab completion's great. And then I'm actually going to declare this class here. So this thing's got 4 properties, and again, I can give them whatever types I want. car color is called paint color. We got the year, make, and model, an int, and 2 strings, right? And we're actually allowed to define a constructor here. So this thing basically says, hey, when I make a new one of these car objects, whether that's with new object or with this new static method, this is what I want to assign to the internal object to give it all these properties. So you'll see down here, we actually have this is the new static method that I was talking about here. So this is very similar to new object, except it's way faster, because this is being done at parse time. So we actually can load this thing here, and I get $A, and $A tells me I've got this object right here, right? Paint color, year, make, and model. And I can actually pass this thing to getMember, as we were showing before, and you'll see that we've got some methods on there, and the type name is car, right? So we can literally define anything as a class. And what's great here is that because PowerShell is now cross-platform to Mac OS and Linux, as long as you're staying purely in the PowerShell language, everything is going to work absolutely cross-platform, right? So I can make applications, I can make any kind of internal business logic that I want in these classes, and that's just going to work across your MacBooks, your Linux servers.
We were kind of surprised, in fact. Of course, if you could drill down into the OS level capabilities, then it's going to be a little different between the different versions. We were surprised. One of our customers, early adopters of PowerShell Core on Linux, actually had like 3,000 lines of a real production script. They changed 3 of them, and it worked across everything. It worked across Windows, it worked across Linux, and it just worked. Because they were dealing with it at a certain level, they were staying essentially in PowerShell. And the idea of classes is now you can get all the concepts you want in one place, and you don't have to leave the language unless you want to for other particular reasons, but you can handle your job in one place and make it portable and leverage your skill set.
Yeah. Now, we've also got, I just want to point out here, I'm also defining a method inside of this class, right? So we've got a 2-string method, which PowerShell will try and sort of guess what your 2-string method is anytime you make an object. But here I can very explicitly say, hey, when I have this car object and I want to convert it to a string, I want you to concatenate the properties exactly like this. So I'm actually going to build a string with the paint color, the year, the make, and model, so that when this gets emitted to some string somewhere, or I've got to go send it to a Linux text shell across the water, I'm spitting out this blue 1992 Toyota Camry, right? I can also, and by the way, these are the new return semantics Kenneth was referring to. So actually, inside of this method, typically in PowerShell, with this old return semantics, if I emit a variable just by itself, that's going to go to the pipeline. It's going to be emitted to out default, and it's actually going to return to the pipeline.
Which does confuse people if you've never done the script before with PowerShell. It's one of the first steps. It's just, you got to get past that.
So every time you guys define a function, right, when you get to the end and you want the function to spit something out, you just type that variable there. With a class, because you're encapsulated inside of this object, you actually have to use a return value to spit that out. And so that means that we can write things to the pipeline and not be worried that those things are going to be emitted to the shell until we explicitly use return. So this is sort of a way to give you guys parse time return semantics without breaking the existing way that functions work.
It's awesome. So
it's very cool stuff.
Yeah, it's a great set. And then I noticed, like a lot of you, only like 1/3 would actually use a DSC. Let's going to go through a brief DSC thing for a second. I'll show you one example here. And I choose this example when we've done, there we are. I choose this particular example because frequently when people do desired state configuration, and when I first demoed this thing with Jeffrey Snover, a couple of years back, a few years ago, we did a whole machine, right? We built the machine with desired state configuration, built a website, and you could actually see the machine come up. We had the VMs that got created all with DSC, and it was a very kind of greenfield thought. Make sense? And I've noticed as people have started to adapt DSC that frequently they do it in that way. That in fact they think, okay, I've really got to get my head around this whole new technology. I've got to go find a new greenfield and actually create the whole system, and the whole system should be under the control of desired state configuration. Now that's fair because desired state configuration does try to assure that you remain in a consistent state. So that's valuable to do that. But one thing that people can consider to take advantage of is instead of sort of more that vertical ownership of the entire box is more of a horizontal approach, if you will. What if you could set the firewall rules across all of your servers, right? And make sure they always stayed there. What if there's some networking settings that you could set and make sure they always stay there no matter what anybody did to them? In one case, this is kind of amusing to me, in one case, a guy came up to me and said, you know, I love this desired state configuration. It solved my political problem with my application team. He said, what was that problem? Well, it turned out that he was on the networking team, I think, and they were one way or the other, and the one team was always putting this new the software. They were assuring that a certain set of software got deployed and was executing on, you know, these 100 servers. Well, the problem was that their algorithm for deciding which servers was not 100% perfect. And so it would go and actually just consume enormous cycles on these other guys' servers where he didn't want them. And he's going, it's driving me crazy. We've tried to talk to them. They don't quite get it. And their algorithm, they're nervous about changing it because they don't want to break anything. You can just picture this, right? And so what I did was I've taken DSC and I just split out a service configuration, and all it does is assure that that service is off. And those machines are off on my machine. So anytime they put it there, every 15 minutes I just remove it. Right? So we actually solve it. It's there, gone, there, gone, right? So he says, and I don't have to talk to him anymore. I'm okay. We're friends, you know? Because before I did, now there's probably better ways to solve it, I'm not saying, but you know, if you just think outside the box a little bit, I think there's some opportunity here. And so if we take a look at this, let's see, let's take a look at it. So I'm going to add a firewall rule, and you'll see here there is no SSH firewall rule. And this is basic desired state configuration. I won't go through the syntax too much. It simply says, hey, look, we want to ensure that the SSH firewall port rule and the remote ports are set to 22 and 22. Remote ports 22, local port is 22.
These look very similar to, you know, the parameters you see on the new firewall rule commandlet, right? But this is a declarative syntax, so you're simply saying, hey, I don't care if the firewall rule is there already. I don't care if you know, it's configured differently. I just want a firewall rule called SSH that's got these properties, period.
Exactly. And so we run this thing. This generates the MOF, which is the intermediate language, right? That sort of runs the configuration. It generates, here's what we want it to look like. And part of the reason you have this intermediate step is so that you can create one of these things, he can create one of these things, and you can actually merge them together. We call those partial configurations. So you can have different departments operating in a joint and coherent way, if you will, actually on a particular configuration. That can be really valuable, you know, again, to avoid problems and let you continue to operate the way you are. Let's see, so I should be able to do a start DSC configuration here.
So you actually want the 27. So what we're doing here is we're basically saying, hey, we've got this, it's going to apply to the local host. And this thing, we run it with the wait, verbose, and force parameters so that we see all the output here. Typically, this would be logged to ETW.
And just to make it obvious, I think you guys run this before, we do a check, we do a test to see if it's there, it's not there, it sets it, it goes ahead and sets it. And in theory, up here,
do a refresh.
I'll go down outbound, how's that?
There you go.
There we are, woo, I got an SSH rule. And in fact, protocol imports, there you are, the 22. Make sense? Now, if somebody fat fingers this, which could happen, change to 23.
So this is your application developer that you're arguing with all the time, coming in and just, you know, changes your port for no reason.
That's right.
But every 15 minutes, this thing's going to do that test again. And it's going to say, hey, do I still have a firewall rule called SSH?
Yeah, you can just
on
do a
port
get
22?
local configuration. It'll tell you exactly what it is. In fact, oh, should I do that here? Get local.
DSC local.
DSC local configuration manager tab.
So this thing's basically going to tell us, hey, we're in this apply and autocorrect mode, and we can edit this, so we can just say, actually apply and monitor and just log to my ETW logs when this thing's wrong so that I can fix it. But in this case, we actually want it to just go in and fix it
And then there's
automatically.
another mode just to actually test. We got all kinds of modes now in PowerShell 5 and 5.0. So if you just want to test, okay, am I compliant or not? You can do that with a test DSC configuration command, or you can do apply and monitor, or you can do apply and autocorrect. So this is apply and autocorrect. We're not going to wait 15 minutes to prove our point. Instead, we are going to do what I'd call a ping here. We're just going to do okay, use the existing one and reapply it.
So this is exactly the same thing that would happen every 15 minutes.
Exactly, and here you'll notice again that the test fails. It says, oh, okay, let's make sure it is. And if I go back in here, and in theory, I refresh, the magic should have happened. Voila, there you are, okay? So DSC, an easy way to sort of make sure things set, stay, or at least are known in a consistent way, and the declarative syntax is a good benefit. I just want to get people's heads around also in particular pondering how to apply it incrementally. So just like PowerShell, when they first came out with PowerShell, people would say, well, should I throw away my VB scripts and port them all? And the answer is, oh, hell no. You know, don't do that. You know, keep what you got, but anytime you do a new project, look at PowerShell, see if there's something you want to do, and if you're investing a lot in an area, then consider it. Same thing with desired state configuration, bring it incrementally into your environment.
Yeah, find that thing that you keep having to go back and fix, and just put that in a config, right? And you're going to slowly build that thing over time until it represents your whole environment.
Okay, PowerShell 5.1, we made some improvements here. There, sort of cleaned it up. Tons of bug fixes between 5.0 and 5.1.
Tons of bug fixes. Again, this is sort of the long tail of community feedback that you guys have been giving us. One of my favorites here, if you guys see those performance improvements in the corner, so we got some feedback that 5.0 is taking a little too long to start up. So we just went ahead and quadrupled how fast it starts up. You know, the first command invocation when I'm coming into a new prompt is actually 13 times faster after I've run PowerShell for the first time.
That's awesome.
So this is, and you know, for each object in the pipeline, twice as fast for any invocation of for each object. Huge numbers.
So it's worth looking at. Package management, of course, continues to improve. So let's see, we've gone through desired state configuration, we've gone through classes.
And by the way, you can write DSC resources now using classes as well. So if you want to sort of represent you know, the structure of some system that you're managing in that declarative way, you can build a class for that thing.
The other thing we've touched on a bit, we won't show a demo here, is the sort of new security available in PowerShell 5, PowerShell 5 on Windows Server 2016. In particular, we have this logging and auditing, so we know who's done what on the system to a level of detail that they can't escape anymore. You know, PowerShell is wonderful, it's powerful, and so not only do good guys like it, but the bad guys like it too. And so we sort of had to close down a few opportunities for them, or at least to make them very discoverable. And so Lee Holmes and others on our team are really into security. In fact, for PowerShell 1.0, because we had an original security challenge to us by the corporation, we ended up been focusing on it ever since. So the auditing and logging is really worth checking out on your servers. Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, so PowerShell Get. Again, you guys are probably pretty used to going out to the web, finding a module, downloading that thing in a zip, unpacking that zip to some folder. It's a pain, right? So we went ahead and created a repository online, the PowerShell Gallery. And with this thing, anyone out there can just publish any module they want in an automatic way, and then we can pull those things down programmatically. So this is great for automated scenarios, especially, you know, you should check out, we're going to be talking about like a continuous integration and deployment pipeline. You know, when you're standing up a container or a test agent or a VM that you know, is cold booting, you need it to go grab some module dependencies before it does a bunch of work, right? So this is a pretty common practice you're going to see now more and more in the wild. We're doing this with all of our GitHub developed stuff, where you just go ahead and install all those modules right at the get-go on a fresh VM. So I'm going to show a little bit here how you can sort of discover modules here. Find module, this works right up against the gallery, and this thing is just going to simply say, hey, I want to give it a string, and let's go look for every module on the gallery there that contains the string Azure.
And it could look against an internal gallery too, right?
Yeah, so we've actually, and you should check this out on GitHub, we've actually got a DSC configuration that allows you to deploy something that looks very, very close to our PowerShell gallery in your own internal environment. So you can share internal artifacts here as well.
Which would be really useful, of course, when you want people to use a common set of modules, a common set of approaches, a common set of configurations. You can just easily do that now.
Yeah, and so, and what's awesome here too is you have versioning constructs, right? So instead of like throwing that internal module on an SMB share and pinging your guy across the hallway to say, hey, there's a new version, you should download this to your machine, you can just do an update module and pull in a new version of that thing, and he's going to see it by himself. So, we search for Azure here. We've got all these Azure modules. There's a ton of these things. I'm not going to go through quite all this, but we're basically able to, sort by author. We can look at this in a slightly different way. So I'm just saying, hey, let's sort by author here. What do we got? And you'll see a ton of these are from us. A ton of these are from our community. A lot of these include some DSC resources.
I'm kind of proud of the PowerShell gallery. I will say we're up to about 4 million downloads now, a little over actually 4 million, 500,000 just last month, which means people are beginning to use it. If you're not using it, you might want to start and join the rest of your peers. We probably have 1,500 almost contributors now to it. So let's keep on that thing, because it just makes it so much faster to get your job done. Steal code.
Totally, yeah.
Legally.
And so what's awesome here, I can actually, I'm sorting here, or I'm filtering here by the sort of official Microsoft Corporation modules, and then I can simply, pass that thing to install module and just go ahead and install, 50 some odd modules to my machine. So I'm not going to do that right now. It's going to strain our network a little bit, but similarly, I can look for stuff from the PowerShell team. This is actually one of my favorites right here. It allows me to basically say, hey, show me all the modules that have DSC resources in them. Right? I can do the same thing with functions, with commandlets. I can also look for, I know there's this X firewall resource, but I can't remember what module it's contained within. So I can actually go, hey, show me the modules that contain this DSC resource. Okay, X networking, this is actually the one Kenneth used to demonstrate that firewall rule. And in the future, we're thinking there's going to be more and more of these Linux modules that show up. So I can actually just sort by an arbitrary text tag. And this thing's going to tell me, hey, these are either related to Linux or running on Linux, and you'll see we've actually got some PowerShell core editions of Azure PowerShell already out there.
That's freaking awesome.
So these things are already running cross-plat on Mac and Linux. So very, very cool stuff.
The right one? All right, so the next step in terms of is, as we sort of put some effort into, is sort of the new DevOps approach. This includes, of course, desired state configuration, but also pester. How do you actually make changes, get them tested, get them out there, and spin very, very quickly as you start to empower your teams and your organization with the DevOps mental model. And this will be drilled into on Friday. Yeah, Friday at, I think, 10:45 by Mark Gray. I don't know if he's here. Mark Gray and Michael Green. They will drill in depth into the overall pipeline here, the CI/CD pipeline that you can leverage with PowerShell. We just sort of maybe give them a brief taste for it, I guess, now.
Yeah, so just really quick, I'm actually going to switch over to 8.
Okay.
So the idea here is that I'm able to basically, with nothing more than a git commit, kick off a test agent using either Visual Studio TFS or Visual Studio Team Services. This thing right here is some configuration data for a web application that's being deployed using DSC. And I'm taking this thing from a dev environment to a test environment. And when I bring it up to that test environment, I want to add a new CNAME record to my DNS server. So I'm actually just going to add here one line. And again, this is really just a very brief overview. Definitely check out Mark Gray's session on Friday for exactly what all is happening under the hood.
I'm not sure everybody's got this. I mean, there's a notion of configuration data. People kind of familiar with that at all? Kind of, yeah. So there's the configuration that I showed before, and then in order to populate different fields and properties in there, you might want configuration data that comes from another file, actually. And so we've actually enabled you, we won't drill into it here, but we've enabled you at DSC to sort of separate, okay, I'm going to write a resource. Oops, excuse me. I own the stuff underneath. I'm a developer. Hey, I'm more of a DevOps guy. I'm going to own how we configure the whole system. And somebody else who allows you actually just to change things like this and take it, just the configuration data itself, just the data, not the way you configure things. I still have servers. I still have whatever VMs I have. But now where they live might change as I go from test to production, right?
So you can think of these as really parameters, sort of, that you're passing into a generic DSC configuration. So you're saying, hey, I want to apply a slightly different values for some generics inside of a larger config.
So he's just changing the values.
So I'm just changing one little value here to say, hey, we want to add, this is our DNS server role, we want to add one little extra component in this environment. And the cool thing here is all I've got to do when I've set up my continuous integration deployment pipeline is simply make a push to a Git repository. And you'll see right here in VSTS, this thing just automatically kicks off a build. And this is integrating a ton of the DevOps tooling that we've built into PowerShell 5.0. So when this build actually kicks off, what it's downloading all of its dependencies with PowerShell Get. It's cloning the repository that contains these DSC resources and all the application assets. It's going to invoke a bunch of pester unit tests to make sure that the configuration that I'm building is in fact a valid DSC config. And then it's going to apply that configuration and use pester again to check to see if my web server is available, that my ports are open, and that the content that's being spit out by the web server is what I expect. So actually, once these tests pass, we've configured this thing to also go ahead and spit out a release build. So as soon as that happens, we queue up a release here, and this thing is, takes just a few seconds, and basically this testagent2.contoso.com that existed in the sort of dev environment, I've now added this www.contoso.com to point to that. So where the application expects testagent2, we now have this layer of abstraction on top of that where the www loads actually the same application. So you can sort of modify this layer of abstraction on top of what the application sees as completely generic. So this is a really great way to just move things from a dev to test to production
cool
environment.
Because it's so fast. I mean, you didn't do anything but push.
Yeah,
right?
just a
and
Git
then
push,
as soon as
right?
it does a push, just to GitHub, and it's a private repository, of course, you don't have to make it public. Or a public one, whatever you want. You just automatically test it, you deploy it, and if you can figure out how to begin to incorporate some of these ideas, I think, into our environments, then over time we'll be able to increase the velocity and the consistency, because what I love about this is that the tests, the idea, there's many ideas that go with DevOps, but one of the ones I like best is that the configuration goes with the code and the test goes with the code, right? So we're testing at the same time we're deploying, so you automate all of that, and it spins through, and PowerShell is really useful for doing that stuff.
Yeah, so definitely check out Mark's session on Friday. Just really, and one of the things I love here too is we're just totally agnostic to platforms, right? I mean, we use AppVeyor with our GitHub modules. With the Linux stuff, you can use Travis CI. You can use Jenkins on-prem. There's all kinds of stuff you can plug this into. So it's really a platform agnostic DevOps.
Yeah, the other piece we didn't mention too much was the script analyzer. Script analyzer is really worth running on your box. It simply tells you, hey, is your script's good, bad? In fact, I think that's open, right? And so they can add new rules and contribute to the whole they want.
Script Analyzer actually employs the CI/CD pipeline itself. And actually, every time you publish a module up to the PowerShell gallery, we're running Script Analyzer against that to make sure that there's no egregious violations of certain security constructs or that sort of thing.
And if you have issues, file them on GitHub. We'll take a look at them, or somebody else can take a look at them. They can fix them. We've made definite improvements based upon the input since then. Clearly on velocity, we have PowerShell Core, allowing you to stand up and tear down servers with Nano. The gallery allows you to bootstrap your scripts. So we've put a fair bit of work into the power part of it. We've tried to describe that a bit. You do less work, you get more value. Into the velocity part of it, how do you actually move things faster and faster? And of course, last but not least, and we'll spend the rest of the time on this, ubiquity, which is how do we get PowerShell everywhere and what does it mean? We've open sourced PowerShell, made it cross-platform, so it's now available, as you know, on Windows, Nano, Mac, and Linux. And of course, down level. Interestingly, so people are sort of aware, we have a PowerShell plugin for VS Code. So to show you what VS Code looks like, and that sort of goes everywhere. It's a nice cross-platform PowerShell editor now for us. It's in its nascent state. It's just kind of beginning, as I get reminded every time I get frustrated by it. He keeps reminding me, like for hours last night, But the point is that it's beginning, it's improving, and it's based on this notion of PowerShell editor services, which is also really a great idea. So,
and editor services is going to allow us to sort of light up. You know, we want more text editors, more platforms, you know, more pluggability so that you get that ISC-like experience everywhere. Yeah, we're looking at Emacs, we're looking at Vim. We've got some Sublime support already. Really cool stuff.
Nice. So we're here everywhere. We already previewed. We should GA sometime in 2017. It's ambiguous. We're going to, really when we GA depends a great deal on when we hear from the community and when we sense ourselves, kind of the union of those two things, or the intersection, or just one I'll look at. When those are both true, we will ship it in GA mode. Right now we're doing it. People do come up and ask, okay, why do I care? What does it mean to me? So let's go through that just a little bit. If you are currently a Windows server or PowerShell user, it simply means two things. One, you can now laugh in the face of your Linux companions that have never tried PowerShell and give them a PowerShell experience, say, aha, I knew you'd love it. Second, that's the most important. The second thing you can do is, in fact, your skill set can now manage more things. If they're screwing up, you can fix it for them. So you have this opportunity now to actually grow your value. And by the way, not only that though, this should be here somewhere, not only that, but you now have a whole community that can contribute. And this is really huge, I think. We've had, before we actually even released, we actually had somebody do a pull request for us and actually fix a few bugs. When we put out the PowerShell gallery a year or something, it's only been a year, we've had like we had like 4 million downloads. I'm just astonished by this ramp thing. But we put out the PowerShell gallery just a little over a year ago. Before we actually announced it, we'd flipped the GitHub repo to public mode the night before on a Wednesday. We were going to announce it on a Thursday. So somebody shifted it on a Wednesday. Within hours, somebody in our community had gone up, found it. I don't know who was lurking. But anyway, he found this thing and gave us a 600-line pull request to go fix some of the resources. We responded, said, thank you, we need you to change these two things. He said, no problem. Minutes later, we actually accepted the full pull request before it was public, officially. So the community is just incredibly powerful. It's a very impassioned community, and so I think this gives them a great opportunity sort of to take it to the next level, not just being community oriented, but more community driven. So take advantage of it. Please file the issues. Please participate. I know I'm belaboring this point, but it's like huge for us. Do you want to
I'm actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw up the GitHub repository right here.
Let's do it.
Just drill into it a little bit. Actually, you want to switch over to 8 for me? So as Kenneth was saying, you know, the awesome thing about this is we live and breathe in this repository now, right? So when you come and file issues here, or you file feature requests for us, or you give us design feedback in existing issues, you're talking directly to the engineering team where they do their work, right? So this is, you know, a lot of people say, what does it really mean to be open source? I'm not a developer. I don't write code. I'm not going to send you pull requests, which we do want you to send us pull requests. And don't feel, you know, like you can't, because we're going to work really closely with you guys, you know, when you submit those things. We're just people. We're friendly. We won't bite, you know, but we will help you sort of get your code up to snuff. But you know, you can just come here and just tell us what you think, right? And we're going to get the people writing the real stuff are going to get right back to you. So, you know, definitely here, and you know, before I go too far, just come download the thing, right? We got PowerShell 6.0 alpha. It's out there for all these platforms. We're expanding the list of platforms that support what .NET Core's got out there. We've got a Docker container if you don't want to put the bits on your actual box.
Which is cool.
Really, really cool. And as we were saying earlier, you know, this actually works side by side on your Windows 10 machines as well. So you want to throw that thing down. You know, I've got on my machine just 2 little shortcuts at the bottom. One of them's full PowerShell. One of them's PowerShell Core. But we've also got this, you know, this contribution guide. Come check this thing out. This is, you know, going to tell you exactly how to file issues. You know, submit tests, docs, code, whatever you guys want. We've also got this sort of governance policy here. So this is how we're approving changes and approving new designs for PowerShell. And actually, if we pop on over to the PowerShell RFC repo, this is a repository where we actually this is me right here, there you go, where we actually have these specs for new features that we potentially want to implement in PowerShell. And so you can pop right into the issues, and these, we have extremely, long, thought out discussions on how we're going to do, new stuff in the PowerShell ecosystem. And so the idea here is that this isn't, again, it's not just community feedback. This is really driven by the community. And in fact, you can submit your own RFCs with new design proposals right into this repo via pull request.
I don't have to do the code. I can just do the thinking and perhaps do it.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about that thing, and we'll either approve that thing via vote, or we'll say, hey, we think this thing should be changed or whatever. But the idea here is that there's a consistent, constant back and forth. And we're just really excited about this repo. I mean, this is open source is huge for us. So to be able to have actually PowerShell and not just all of our DSC resources and modules is phenomenal.
It's awesome. And we're not quite all the way there. We have not yet open sourced the local configuration manager for the LCM, but the rest of PowerShell is all essentially there, and you can start helping us improve it, including the set of commandlets and so forth. So help us out. Management products, we got a single stack. Let's see other values. Just a quick shout out to the various Linux users. As we talk to them, just so you know how we're addressing them, we're not trying to say actually that they need to drop Bash or Perl or anything else. We actually interoperate really well with these things. This goes back to the whole, let's take the text, whatever they have, and we'll make it an object. It turns out we're layering over them pretty nicely. We can provide a nice layer of sort of abstraction for them. So in fact, you can have the same kind of code that actually runs in 2 or 3 or 4 places. And we'll talk a little about how to write that, I think. We have, I think, enough time here.
So when we talk about portable modules, right, what does that really mean? There's really 3 ways that you can write a portable module, and it really depends on whether you're looking at the heterogeneous for Windows, Mac, and Linux, heterogeneous across Windows SKUs, heterogeneous across Linux distributions. So first we've got .NET Core, right? When you're writing a binary module, or you're using add type and new object and static method invocation of these .NET objects and reference assemblies, or assemblies, excuse me, as long as you're staying in pure .NET Core, they've taken care of the cross-platform stuff, right? And so you'll see this with get process, right? Our binary get process commandlet is just going to work the same across every platform because we're using the underlying process info object from .NET Core. Similarly, you see more and more of the world, just as we were looking at with the GitHub API, exposed in REST APIs. So at a much higher layer, you're dealing with a lot of these sort of SaaS applications. You're getting back structured data in the form of JSON or YAML or XML, and you want to sort of suck that into PowerShell, as we were talking about. So as long as you're staying in that invoke REST method layer, right, you're going to be able to do this thing across Windows, Mac, and Linux because that invoke REST method commandlet's going to work the same everywhere.
So all the stuff we showed before would work just fine.
Yeah, exactly. So that invoke REST method demo for GitHub, that's going to work exactly the same on Mac and Linux. Third type of heterogeneous modules, and this is one that we were talking about where it sort of just worked for some people, some of our customers running scripts in production, is where you're relying on native binaries that are ubiquitous across either Linux distributions or across Windows, Mac, and Linux. So for instance, Git, right? Git.exe or the Git binary on Linux basically operates exactly the same. So as long as I'm parsing text out of that thing and either doing some regular expressions or using convert from string or just simply outputting that text to the pipeline, I can use PowerShell in the same way across all these different platforms. And we're actually going to be showing a PoshGit here in just a second. So we've got these sort of notion of conditionals based on different platforms. And
so just in case it doesn't go smoothly and easy, you can still put an if statement in there.
Right. So this is sort of your trap door, right? So something you actually need this extra little feature on Windows or something works slightly differently on Linux, and you need to sort of fall back to some conditional logic. So either you can use this notion of PowerShell additions, right? So you've got, in PS version table, we added this new property, PS addition. And that thing can be either desktop or core. where desktop is the .NET Framework edition of PowerShell, and core is the .NET Core edition, right? So maybe a type is only available in .NET Full, and you want to say, hey, on .NET Core I actually have to use some more complex logic, but on Full, I'm going to fall back or use that more rich type. Similarly, you can use uname-a across .NET or across Linux distributions to say, hey, when I'm on Debian, I need to do this one thing, but when I'm on CentOS, I need to do this other thing, right? And so that's a very sort of the heterogeneous across Linux distributions type of conditional that we might be looking at. And then you can also just look for the existence of binaries.
When all else
right?
fails, it's there or it's not.
Right. So when I'm doing cron job management, which is sort of the Linux equivalent of scheduled jobs, I might have cron tab on one distro, and I might have some other cron management system. And I'm going to make a higher level of abstraction in PowerShell so that actually a single commandlet could operate against both of those things and pump all of that into a single type that we've defined from a class. We're going to be showing some of that in just a second.
And of course, you stay in as we said before, stay in pure PowerShell world, you stay in there.
Yeah, so as long as you're building on top of modules that have already done all this cross-platform stuff for you, then you can just script against those modules and everything's going to work.
Should we show them what the ifs look like? Just
yeah. So if we oh yes, excuse me. Yes, let's pop on over to this machine here. This is 5.
Now, one thing we didn't demo that's actually worth noting, it just came out, it's really cool, is and hopefully it will already become more public in just a little bit. We just got internally working, is the ability to actually stay on your MacBook and manage your Windows servers without having to download new bits to the Windows server, because essentially they ported WSMan or remoting protocol to the Mac to the Mac OS and to Linux, right? So
yeah,
in fact, now you can actually begin to remote from here as he's getting ready to remote from my Mac or OS all the way over to a Linux box. It's pretty cool.
No, and I'm actually, just because this is too cool, I'm just going to show this real quick.
Oh, you're going to show it? Okay, good.
Yeah. So we've got here, I'm running in an Ubuntu guest here, and I'm going to create a new PS session against my Win10 machine, which is the host that's hosting this VM. And again, this isn't out yet. We only support local accounts and basic authentication.
Which is a challenge you're looking at.
But we'll get there. But I'm going to create a new PS session exactly the same as I would on a Windows machine, right? And this thing's going to prompt me for my local password. I'm going to stick that thing in. And again, this is going to work on your MacBook, so you don't have to run VMs anymore just to remote into your Windows servers. And just to be clear, I'm sitting inside of PowerShell Core. This is 6.0 alpha. And I'm actually going to do an enter PS session on this new session object that is created. And you'll see, boom, I'm on my Win10 machine, right? PS version table, I'm on 5.1 desktop edition. This is .NET Full now. Super awesome.
Desktop is the way we talk about Windows PowerShell, Windows Full, just because it's got the
And who am I?
stuff with it.
I'm Joey on my Win10 machine. So this is, seriously, you don't have to run your 6 gig VM anymore just to remote into your Windows servers on your Mac OS.
Hey, invoke command works too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So I've got this object here, and I can actually do an invoke command against this session, and I'm going to do a script block of a get process.
Because get process is cross-platform now.
Doesn't even have to be, because we're running this one on the Windows machine.
Windows side,
Yeah. So this thing, boom, it just batched it up. What kind of object is this? That's our process object. Awesome. And there it is. Those are my clearly Windows processes that I'm getting on my Linux machine. So
PowerShell everywhere,
awesome.
Heterogeneous. It's the wave of the future.
So really quick, fun stuff. I got to kill that to get out of there. Like I said, just got this working.
That's right.
So here, I just want to talk really quick. This cron tab module, looks like we got a few minutes left. So this thing, again, we're defining a cron job object. This is going to work across any distro where cron job is there. Normally on a Linux machine, I would be stuck using sort of come on.
This is the Visual Studio stuff we were talking about, Visual Studio Code with a PowerShell adapter now to it. And as we did note, it is mostly working. It's not completely, it's out there.
Excuse me. not actually
It is good to be
PowerShell.
running PowerShell.
Yes.
I'm good with that.
So, all right, we import this module. So typically we do this cron-tab-l, and you get this really like arcane text back of the thing. Like, what is this doing? I've got some cron job. I don't know what any of this means. So we've just wrapped this up in some regex. We're just doing string splitting with some separators, and boom, get cron job. It's going to run cron tab, and it's going to spit back this cron job object that's been defined as a class. So if I pipe this thing into get member, you can see this is a type. This is a type cron job, right? We've got all these properties. This is all discoverable. You're going to get the filtration that you're used to. So I can say. And
this demo, to be clear, is actually up on PowerShell demos, right? So if you go to the GitHub, we got a whole series of demos up there already about there was anything that will work on Linux or otherwise. So don't be bashful. You just download the demos. You clone it. It's easy to clone. It's just a little button to click.
So this guy, I'm like going to make some new cron jobs here, right? So we've got a few, and I can go, hey, like I actually just want to know which of these are running every day, right? So this is the same where object filtration that you're used to. And I'm sorry, can you guys see this okay, by the way, in the back? Not really? Okay, hold on. There we go. Well, not quite too much. All right, that better? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So again, it's the same where object that you're used to. I can filter on these things, and it's just way clearer what's going on. So we encourage you guys to write more of these things. Definitely come check out this cron tab module to see how this is implemented. But again, it's not super crazy stuff. We're splitting up a string here, right? And we're building up that object. What's that?
You have one of these?
Yeah. So also real quick. Just want to show how you can do this sort of conditional across operating systems. So if I look at, oops, I'm going to pop into PowerShell. I've installed PoshGit actually just as it works on a Windows machine right here into my Linux machine. And small bug with PS readline, so I'm just going to remove that real quick. But if I do .source my profile, it's going to load in PoshGit, and it's going to try and write this prompt to the screen. So you'll see I get some errors, right? And while it might actually work pretty good when I'm sitting inside of a repository, did any of you guys use PoshGit, by the way? Yeah, it's awesome, right? You get this prompt right on the screen that tells you, whether you're behind or ahead of your remote repositories, and whether you've got some unstaged commits. Super cool stuff, right? So we've got this prompt now that's PoshGit, but again, I don't want to see this error every single time. So let's look at this thing, right? It says operation is not supported on this platform. Okay, that's on line 94 of getPrompt.ps1. So let's pull this thing up. I've got it real handy right here. Okay, it looks like I'm using some assembly that's clearly Windows only, right? We're checking for whether I'm a Windows admin or not. And I can make this a little bit bigger here. Let's just pop it open all the way.
Yep.
So all I got to do is just say, look, I don't need to run this code on a Linux machine. So let's just add this new runtime variable. We've got an is Windows, an is Mac, and an is Linux variable. And this thing is just going to return true or false
sweet, huh?
if I'm Windows or Mac or Linux. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this thing in an is Windows block. Save that. I'm going to remove PoshGit. It's a remove module. And I'm going to re-import PoshGit. And boom, no error, right? Woo. So, by the way, PoshGit, awesome. Props to the author and maintainer of PoshGit, because this thing did just work cross-platform, right, with no modification. I didn't do anything else except add that is Windows line. So super, super cool.
That's it. So, it's coming. It's coming. There it is. All right. So basically, PowerShell everywhere, and contribute, make it better, grow. One thing worth noting is that not only can you file bugs, make feature requests, give feedback, you can also contribute not just to code but to documentation. If there's a typo, just fix it. It's okay. Unless you don't want to fix it, you don't have to, but I'm just saying, if it's bugging you, fix it. You're empowered. Don't wait on us. We're working, but you might be able to help us future. There are other related sessions, kind of worth pointing out really quick. Jeffrey Snover and Don Jones, I believe, are actually doing their PowerShell Unplugged annual sort of event worth going to, just watching them do their shtick. Even if you know PowerShell really well, they're fun to watch. Gain insight to release pipeline, although doesn't talk about it, does drill into somewhat DSC, and is the deep drill by Mark Gray and Michael Green on how to really implement and what it really means to do a CI/CD pipeline in your enterprise, and that's really worth your time. And then, of course, Stephen Owen's got another intro to PowerShell Hub Talk that's kind of fun.
Stephen's fantastic. I learned tons about PowerShell.
I will note that the PowerShell homepage we just put up here we just put it out again last year. We did a few things that way. It's now had, I think we had 250,000 views, actually 250,000 unique visitors actually in August. There's valuable stuff there. Go look at it. Any announcements, we'll blog, but we'll actually keep them there live all the time. It's easy to get to the PowerShell repo from there. And of course, you have PowerShell open source and so forth. Don't be shy. Other sessions, OMS actually has some great sessions on Thursday and Friday that talk about DSC. And thank you.
Definitely, we really appreciate if you guys can evaluate this session. As it says, your feedback is really important. Really hope that you guys enjoyed this. So thank you again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.